My mother refused to help while my wife was screaming in labor after years of using me like her right. So I made one move that left them speechless. Hey Reddit. I'm a 33-year-old man married to the love of my life, Layla. She's strong, warm, grounded, the kind of person who balances out my tendency to take too much responsibility for everyone else's problems. We've been together 6 years, married for 3, and this year was supposed to be the most beautiful year of our lives. Our first child, a little girl. We named her Hope before she was even born. But what happened during Layla's labor made me question everything, especially the blind loyalty I had given my mother for over 3 decades. I grew up in a single-parent home. My mom Mona raised me on her own after my dad left when I was barely 5. She worked hard, no doubt about that. But somewhere along the way the struggle hardened her, or maybe it twisted her sense of what love looked like. Since my first paycheck at 18 I'd been helping her. Rent when she was short, groceries, car repairs. Even when I was in college I was working double shifts to make sure she didn't go without. When I got a job in tech after graduation my income doubled, and so did her requests. It started small, covering a bill here, paying for new tires there. But over time she stopped even pretending it was temporary. She called me her little investment, joking that she raised me so I could take care of her. At first I brushed it off as her way of coping. I owed her. Right. She sacrificed for me. But the thing is, once Layla and I got serious the strain started showing. Layla saw what I refused to admit. My mother treated me less like a son and more like an ATM that occasionally brought her groceries. Still, I couldn't cut her off, not after everything. When we got married I kept sending money. When we bought our first home she expected her own room even though we could barely afford a guest space. And when Layla got pregnant I asked Mom if she could help us out just a little. Be there. Support us. She said she was too tired, too old to be playing nursemaid. It all came crashing down the night Layla went into labor. Her contractions hit suddenly 2 weeks earlier than expected. I call my mom at 1:30 a.m. desperate. Layla was doubled over in pain and I needed someone to come stay with our dog while I rushed her to the hospital. A 15-minute favor. My mom lived just across town. Her response: "Why are you calling me so late? I need my rest. Can't you just leave the dog food and go?" I was stunned. I explained Layla was in serious pain, that this was it. Our baby was coming. She sighed dramatically and said that wasn't her problem. That wasn't her problem. I hung up numb. My hands were shaking, but I helped Layla into the car, left the dog with enough food and water, and drove like a man possessed to the hospital. Through all the panic and the fear that something might go wrong, I kept thinking one thing. My mother didn't even care. Layla gave birth to our daughter after 14 hours of labor. It was terrifying and beautiful and exhausting. I cried when I held Hope in my arms, but there was a cold pit in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Over the next few days I didn't hear from my mother once. No call. No message. Not even a cheap congratulations text. She knew Layla was due any day. She knew I had begged for her help and she just erased herself. When we finally brought Hope home I sat on the edge of our bed and told Layla what had happened on that night. She wasn't surprised. She was calm, but I saw it in her eyes. She had reached her breaking point with my mother long ago. I was just now catching up. The next weekend my mother finally called, not to ask about Hope, not to check on Layla. No. She called because she needed money. Her heater had broken and she didn't want to use her emergency savings because she had been saving it for a trip to Miami with her church group. I stared at the phone in disbelief. My newborn daughter was sleeping in my arms, her tiny breath soft against my neck, and here was my mother asking me for hundreds of dollars while still pretending the last 2 weeks hadn't happened. So I told her no. It was the first time I had ever refused or anything. Her voice changed immediately. She called me ungrateful. She said I was being manipulated by my wife, that I was turning my back on family. That word family made me snap. I told her family doesn't hang up when you're screaming for help in the middle of the night. Family doesn't ignore the birth of their grandchild because they're tired. Family doesn't drain you for decades and then act like you're the villain when you stop bleeding for them. She hung up on me that time. I thought that would be it, but the next day she showed up at our door. Layla was still recovering, tired, vulnerable. I told her to stay in the bedroom while I handled it. My mom came in like a storm, demanding to see her granddaughter, acting like everything was normal. I didn't let her pass the front hallway. I told her she wasn't welcome in our lives anymore. Not until she could acknowledge the way she had used me. Not until she apologized for abandoning me when I needed her the most. Not until she stopped pretending her entitlement was love. She screamed, called me heartless, told me I was choosing my wife over my own blood. I didn't argue. I just calmly said yes. I was choosing the woman who had never once let me down, who carried our daughter for 9 months, who cried through the pain while my mother turned off her phone. And then I did something I never thought I could do. I blocked her number. I cut her off financially. I chose peace over guilt. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in my adult life, there were no constant calls, no veiled demands, no emotional blackmail, just quiet. And in that quiet, I started to heal. I began to realize that love isn't measured by what you sacrifice but by what you build. Layla and I were building a family, and I wasn't going to let the past poison that. But just when I thought it was over, when I thought the dust had settled, I got a call from my cousin Sarah. She told me something that made my blood run cold. Apparently my mother had been telling the entire extended family that I had abandoned her in her old age, that Layla was keeping her granddaughter from her, that I had turned into a greedy, selfish man. And worse, she had started making moves behind my back, financial moves. That was the moment I realized the situation was far from over, and what I did next was the one move that left them speechless. After my cousin Sarah told me about what my mother was spreading, I felt this deep wave of shame and anger. Not only had she abandoned me when I needed her, but now she was playing the victim and making me out to be the villain to everyone who would listen. She twisted the truth so thoroughly that some relatives had already begun messaging me passive-aggressive, guilt-laced texts about how they always knew Layla would isolate me, that I had changed, that I was no longer the dutiful son I once was. But what really sent me over the edge was what Sarah said at the end of the call. "You might want to check your credit history," she said. I don't want to alarm you, but I overheard Amona talking about using something she called her backup account, and your name came up. My heart dropped. See, a few years back, when I was still a dumb, trusting son trying to help his struggling mother, I co-signed a credit card for her, thinking it would help her build her own credit. She promised it was just for groceries and emergencies. She never used it much back then, at least as far as I could tell, but I hadn't looked in a long time. She always told me she'd cut it up after she got her own card. That night I logged into the old credit account and I nearly blacked out from rage. Over $14,000 in new charges. The last 4 months had been a spending spree: flights, spa appointments, designer shoes, Amazon orders, a whole new living room set. She had maxed it out and then ignored the minimum payments. She hadn't cut the card. She had waited for the moment I stopped sending her money and then used the backup plan. Me. I sat in silence for a while, watching my daughter sleep, one tiny hand curled against her cheek like nothing bad existed in the world. My blood boiled. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. This was fraud, theft, betrayal of the highest level. The next morning I walked into the bank, took all the documents I had, and froze the card. I disputed the charges, explaining that I was not the one who had made them and had not authorized use beyond the original purpose years ago. I filed a police report. I knew it might escalate things, but I wasn't going to let her destroy my credit and feed off me like a parasite anymore. Then I did something I never thought I would be capable of. I called a family meeting. I messaged every cousin, aunt, and uncle who had texted me or believed her side of the story. I invited them to my home, not hers, and I told them I had something to show them. Only 5 people showed up. I didn't care. I printed out statements. I showed them the charges. I showed them the timestamps that proved she had been lying about needing help while actually booking a hotel in Miami. I showed them texts where she asked for money the same week she dropped $1,000 on clothes. I told them about her refusal to help the night my wife went into labor and how she didn't even acknowledge the birth of her grandchild. I laid it all out calmly. No theatrics, just truth. Most of them were stunned. One aunt had the decency to cry. Another tried to defend her until I showed them her text calling Layla a controlling gold digger. I ended the meeting by saying I was done, that if they wanted to stay in my life they could, but not if they brought her name up again, not if they kept pretending this was some small misunderstanding between a mother and son. It wasn't. It was a pattern of financial and emotional abuse, and I was done being her victim. That same night my mother left a voicemail. She was crying, hysterical, incoherent. Said I had humiliated her. Said I was killing her with stress. She begged me to take back the police report. Said I was her only child, that I owed her. I didn't respond. A week later I got a notice in the mail. She was trying to fight the credit card dispute by claiming I had always let her use the card and that the charges were approved. So I made my final move. I contacted a lawyer and officially severed all financial ties. I removed her as my emergency contact. I blocked her on everything. I even sent a cease and desist letter through my attorney warning her not to impersonate me or use my information again or I'd pursue criminal charges. My wife cried when I told her what I'd done, not out of sadness but relief. She held me for a long time, then whispered thank you. I didn't know how heavy that burden had been until I finally put it down. We spent the next month adjusting to life with hope. I took paternity leave and soaked up every second I could with my daughter. Layla healed. We healed. The house was quiet, peaceful, whole. Eventually the calls from extended family stopped. People picked sides. Some stayed away, some reached out in quiet solidarity. I didn't care anymore. I had my family now. Hope started giggling one morning while Layla changed her diaper and it was like the world rewrote itself. That sound was purer than anything I'd ever known. No bitterness, no guilt, no expectations. Just life. Fresh, innocent, and full of promise. About 3 months later I got one last letter in the mail. No return address. Handwritten. It was from my mother. She said she didn't understand how I could do this to her. That she had raised me alone, sacrificed for me, loved me in her own way. She still didn't apologize. She still didn't ask about her granddaughter. She just ended the letter with a final sentence that read, "One day you'll see how much you've hurt me." I folded the letter and threw it in the fire. I had seen enough. I didn't need her brand of love anymore. I didn't need to be the family Adam. I didn't need the guilt or the manipulation. What I needed was already here: my wife, my daughter, our little home, and the future we were building free of chains. That was the last move I made, and it was the one that left them speechless.